This is the story of a man who thought he knew about heartbreaks until his ex-wife showed up in court asking for half of his properties. The judge definitely had other plans.
My name is Garrett Wells, and I never thought I'd be the kind of man sitting in a courthouse waiting room, rehearsing deep breathing exercises just to keep my hands from shaking. I was raised in rural Ohio, the kind of place where men fix their own trucks, keep their word, and marry once. My father was married to my mother for 41 years before she passed. I watched him hold her hand in that hospital bed, like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. That was the blueprint I carried into my own marriage. That was the standard I believed I was building toward. 12 years. That's how long I was married to the woman I'll simply call my wife, because she doesn't deserve the dignity of a name in this story anymore. We met in our mid-20s at a corporate retreat in Nashville. She was sharp, beautiful, the kind of woman who commanded a room without trying. I fell hard and fast, and within 2 years we were standing at an altar in front of our families making promises I fully intended to keep. The first several years were good. We built a life together in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked as a civil engineer for a regional infrastructure firm, and she managed marketing for a mid-sized healthcare company. We bought a 4-bedroom house with a wraparound porch. We talked about children constantly, even picked out names during lazy Sunday mornings in bed. But month after month, year after year, nothing happened. The doctors told us conception would be difficult without intervention. We started fertility treatments. 3 rounds, 2 miscarriages, and 1 soul-crushing amount of emotional debt later, we were still childless. That grief changed her. Or maybe it revealed her. I still haven't decided which. Around year 9, she started staying later at the office. Weekend conferences became more frequent. She started locking her phone screen whenever I walked into the room. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself stress does strange things to people. I told myself a lot of lies to avoid the one truth sitting right in front of me. The confirmation came on a Thursday night in February. I had come home early from a site inspection that got canceled due to weather. Her car was in the driveway, which surprised me since she'd told me she'd be working until 8. I walked in through the side door and I heard voices upstairs. What I found in my own bedroom, in the bed I had purchased on the sheets I had helped fold and lay out the previous Sunday, I will not describe in graphic detail. I'll simply say that the man in my bed was someone I recognized. He was a colleague of hers I had met at 3 separate company events. I had shaken his hand. I had bought him a drink at her firm's holiday party 2 Decembers ago. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I stood in that doorway for what felt like 10 full seconds. Then I turned around, walked back downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and called my attorney. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, wrapped in a robe. Eyes red, already launching into explanations I had no interest in hearing. I held up one hand, looked her in the eyes, and said 4 words. I want a divorce. Then I got up, grabbed my keys, and drove to my brother's house 40 minutes away, where I slept on his pull-out couch for 2 weeks while the process began. What followed was 6 months of the most draining, humiliating, and infuriating legal choreography I have ever experienced. She retained one of the most aggressive family law attorneys in Mecklenburg County, a woman known locally for her scorched earth approach. Right away, her team filed for temporary spousal support, claiming my wife had sacrificed career advancement to support our household. That claim was laughable given that she had been promoted twice in the last 3 years and earned a salary within $10,000 of mine. But facts don't always slow down aggressive attorneys. My lawyer, a quiet but razor-sharp man named who had been practicing family law for 27 years, told me to stay calm, document everything, and trust the process. I did exactly that. I kept records of every joint account transaction. I printed every real estate record tied to our shared property. I retrieved my own medical records from our fertility clinic, documentation that would later prove more significant than I ever could have anticipated. The hearing date was set for a Tuesday in late September. I arrived early, wearing the navy suit I reserve for professional presentations, accompanied by my attorney and a thick accordion folder of financial records. I sat at our assigned table, folded my hands, and waited. She walked in 11 minutes after the session was called to order. The room shifted almost immediately. Several people glanced up. Her attorney walked slightly ahead of her, but all eyes moved past counsel to my wife, who was visibly, unmistakably, enormously pregnant. She was at least 7 months along, and she was smiling at me from across that courtroom like she had already won. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. It wasn't rage. It wasn't the kind of explosive, cinematic anger you see in movies where a man flips a table or storms out of a room. What I felt was something quieter and far more clarifying. It was the cold, clean sensation of every remaining doubt I had carried about my decision being permanently erased. Whatever grief I still nursed about the end of my marriage, whatever small voice had occasionally whispered that maybe I had given up too soon, went completely silent the moment I saw her walk through that door. She had calculated this. That much was obvious. Her attorney had likely advised her, or she had engineered it herself, that walking into a divorce proceeding visibly pregnant would trigger a particular kind of emotional and legal leverage. The strategy, as I understood it, was layered. First, create visual sympathy. A pregnant woman standing before a judge reads as vulnerable, as someone deserving of protection and provision. Second, imply financial dependency. If a child was coming, surely the court would feel compelled to award more generous spousal support to ensure stability. Third, and perhaps most importantly, rattle me. Make me see what she had built with another man, and watch me come apart at the seams in front of the judge. She did not know me as well as she believed. My attorney leaned slightly toward me and said in a low voice, "Stay exactly as you are." I nodded once and returned my eyes to the front of the room. The honorable judge presiding over our case was a woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back severely, and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. She had a reputation in the legal community for being methodical, unsentimental, and extraordinarily perceptive. My attorney had mentioned her by reputation during our preparation sessions and had said, with a rare trace of admiration, that she had seen every trick in the book twice. Proceedings opened with the standard formalities. Both attorneys submitted their documentation. The financial disclosures were entered into the record. My wife sat across the aisle looking composed, one hand resting on her rounded belly in a gesture that I suspected was entirely intentional and entirely performed. Her attorney opened with an impassioned statement about my wife's contributions to our household, her emotional labor during our fertility struggles, and her current condition, which counsel described as a testament to her desire for the family life that our marriage had tragically failed to provide. The implication hung in the air like smoke. She had found love. She was going to be a mother. She deserved to be financially supported while she rebuilt her life. I watched the judge's face during this entire presentation. It revealed nothing. Then the judge set down her pen, removed her glasses from her nose, and looked directly at my wife. Not at her attorney. At her. She asked one question. Given that the petitioner has filed medical documentation indicating a diagnosis of severe male factor infertility confirmed during the marriage, can you clarify for this court the conception timeline of your current pregnancy relative to the date of separation? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. My attorney had submitted those fertility clinic records 3 weeks prior. Every test result, every diagnosis, every clinical note confirming that due to my specific medical condition, the probability of natural conception on my part was less than 1%. We had known this since year 7 of our marriage. It was part of why the IVF rounds had been structured the way they were. The pregnancy she had walked into that courtroom carrying was, by every medical standard on record, biologically impossible for me to have fathered. She had not expected that question. Her attorney had not prepared her for it, or perhaps had not known to. Whatever script she had rehearsed for this day did not include a judge who had actually read the submitted documentation carefully enough to do the arithmetic. Her composure fractured in real time. The hand on her belly stilled. Her attorney leaned in and whispered urgently, but my wife was no longer performing for the room. She was somewhere private and panicked behind her own eyes, and everyone present could see it. The judge did not press further in that moment. She didn't need to. She simply returned her glasses to her nose, made a notation, and moved the proceedings forward with the same unhurried authority she had maintained throughout. The final settlement awarded her a fraction of what her attorney had originally demanded. No long-term spousal support, an equitable but not generous division of shared assets. The house was ordered sold, proceeds split according to documented contribution. My retirement accounts, built entirely before and independently during the marriage, remained mine. I walked out of that courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon in late September into pale autumn sunlight, loosened my tie, and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, just breathing. My brother was waiting by the car. He didn't ask how it went. He looked at my face and simply nodded. I nodded back. I drove home to the apartment I had rented 6 months prior. It was small, quiet, and entirely mine. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the street below for a while, thinking about my father and the way he had held my mother's hand. Someday, I told myself, the right way, with the right person. But first I was going to enjoy the silence.
Justice most at times comes in a way we do not expect. Just one question from the judge destroyed all our ambitions. Follow for more stories.